There it is. Welcome, welcome, good evening everybody, and welcome to On the Front Lines Against Militarism and Extremism. We are so thrilled and so delighted by this turnout. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm Abigail Disney. I'm one of the executive producers of Trials of Spring, which is our multimedia, actually I've decided to call it Ambi Media project, about women and the Arab world and the movements for democracy in the Arab world. I'm also the founder of Peace is Loud, which is our primary partner and sponsor for tonight. And we highlight the role of women in peacemaking around the world with media and events and film. And our executive director, Angie Wang, is over here, along with much of our staff. Jamie Dobie, Joanne, if you're on the staff, raise your hand. There you go, Joanne. There you go. So thanks everybody for coming. I want to thank our co-hosts for tonight's event, the permanent mission of Norway to the United Nations, the Overseas Press Club of America, and the International Civil Society Action Network. We so appreciate your helping us get this together. And I also want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I know it's a busy couple of weeks here at the United Nations. There are a lot of meetings. So for all of you to take your time and come here, we're so grateful, and we thank you in advance for the questions I think you'll probably be asking and the interest in the program. Ginny and I have been working now for a long time on projects like the Trials of Spring and Women, War, and Peace and Pray the Devil Back to Hell and on Peace is Loud. And everything that we do is grounded in the idea that voices matter. It doesn't just matter to tell the story, but who tells the story and from what perspective and from whose eyes and why. And militarism and extremism are the two supreme challenges. I call them the twin pillars of patriarchy. They are the two primary challenges to democracy, but also the two primary challenges to women's lives around the world. And they're rising as they've never risen before in the 21st century. We are therefore in need now more than we've ever been for women's voices. And this is why we're so committed to this project, particularly in the Middle East. So tonight we're honored to present you with this extraordinary panel of experts from the region, and we're also going to be showing you film clips from the Trials of Spring and interviews with some women activists. So we're going to open the event officially with our esteemed co-host, Geir Pedersen, who is our permanent representative from Norway to the United Nations. Mr. Pedersen was previously the Director General of the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Department for the United Nations Peace and Humanitarian Affairs. Ambassador Pedersen served as the Secretary General, Special Personal Representative, and Special Coordinator for Lebanon at the level of Undersecretary General from April 2007 to February 2008. Ambassador Pedersen has also served as Director of Asia and Pacific Division in the Department of Political Affairs. So, Ambassador Pedersen, thank you so much for co-hosting this, and welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a wonderful evening to be here together with you, to look at this audience, the panel, wonderful panel, excellent moderator, and Abby and her team, who we know that whatever they touch turns into gold or diamonds, and I do not know what. We have had the pleasure of collaborating with you for so long, and we're extremely proud that we're able to continue that cooperation, Abby. And wish you every success for your continued important work that you are doing. Let me also thank our long-time partner with partnership with Sanam Anderlini and the International Civil Society Action Network. As Abby mentioned, this is an event that is not only timely but extremely important. I think when we watch the news, this is more or less what we see every day. But we see only an aspect of the news, and today we will concentrate on perhaps the most important aspect of it as we see it. Because you can't fight extremism and terrorism only through military means. You have to look at other aspects of it as well, and I think that's what we're going to see tonight. We have to support the forces on the ground that actually promote peace, democracy, and prevent radicalization and fight for human rights. And I think if we forget that, we will not be successful. We know from our own experience in Norway that extremism is actually, there is one common denominator, and that is its hateful expression towards women. We saw it in the dramatic killings of Mr. Breivik at Utøya camp. His attitudes towards women was full of extremism, the same that we see from ISIS and others. So we know that extremists have to be fought against on all different levels. We know that the extremists who kidnapped girls in Nigeria, shot Malala in Pakistan, and killed Salva Burgasis in Libya, all realized the same thing, that educated and empowered and vocal women represent the biggest threat to extremism. Promoting sustainable peace through prevention and peacemaking is therefore, of course, the highest policy priority for Norway. Therefore, we support women activists and women organizations. It's as simple as that. I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion, and I'm very pleased to introduce to you our moderator, Rukmini Callimachi. Nearly correct? Yes, thank you. So I will drop your last name and I will say Rukmini. Okay? Has a very extensive background. She was the West Africa bureau chief for the Associated Press until she was hired by the New York Times as a foreign correspondent. She began her journalism career in 2001, joined the AP in 2003, and has been spending 7 years in West Africa. She is a two-time finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in International Reporting, and most recently in 2014, for her discovery and exploration of internal documents that shattered myths and deepened understanding of the global terrorist network of Al-Qaeda. The series, the Al-Qaeda Papers, won 2 overseas press club prizes this year and the National Headliners Award. So as you all understand, we are in the best of hands. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. I'm more accustomed to being the only woman on an all-male panel. So it's truly a pleasure tonight to be one of 5 women at this gathering tonight. We have an amazing gathering tonight of female leaders, activists, and artists. Our first panelist is the Academy Award-nominated filmmaker Ginny Redeker. In 2006, her film about women in war-torn Liberia went on to win numerous awards, including Best Documentary at the Tribeca Film Festival. She's the executive producer of Trials of Spring, a project which we will see a snippet of tonight, which examines the role of women during and after the Arab Spring. Our second panelist, Rana Allam, is the former editor of Daily News Egypt, an English-language newspaper in Cairo. In 2004, she moved to online journalism, launching the largest Arabic news and politics website, Masraoui. Our third panelist, Sanam Anderlini, is the co-founder of the International Civil Society Action Network. Last year, she received the United Nations Association Perdita Houston Award for Human Rights. And in 2011, she was appointed to be the first senior expert on gender and inclusion on the United Nations' standby team of mediation experts. And last, but certainly not least, our final panelist tonight is Mossarat Qadeem, who is the founder of the Payment Trust. The Payment Trust is a network of women legislators and activists in Pakistan who are working on peace building. I'd like to start tonight with Ginny. And I wondered if you could describe for us the film that we're going to watch tonight. the inspiration for it, and how it evolved from where you thought it would be in 2011.
So I'm going to show you two clips tonight from the work that we're doing. One is a trailer for the film, which is called Trials of Spring, and it focuses on Egypt. And the other is a story from Yemen, because as Abby mentioned, we're doing a multimedia project where we're doing one big film on Egypt, and then we realized that there's no way in the world that we could cover all of the stories that are coming out of the Arab world about what women are doing. And so we have short pieces that we're working on in conjunction with the New York Times. There's going to be a special series that occurs starting next month for 6 weeks. And it will have one story from Yemen, one story from Bahrain, one story from Syria, one story from Libya, another from Egypt and Tunisia. And the inspiration for the film for the project really came from, Abby and I were approached and asked to do it because of the success that we had had with both Pray the Devil Back to Hell and with a series that we did called Women, War, and Peace. And when we started, we really thought we were going to be doing a celebratory piece about what wonderful women had participated in the roles that they played. And in the course of filming, not that the women have become any less wonderful, but history has certainly changed, and it's become a dramatically different piece than we started with, particularly the film, which now focuses primarily on one young woman who went to a demonstration in 2011 against military rule. She's a village girl. She kind of snuck out from her parents. They didn't know that she was going, and she ended up getting arrested and tortured and then charged with a whole series of crimes for participating in the demonstration. And we have footage from that day onward, and we followed her onward till like 3 weeks ago. Her case has continued to make its way through the courts, was transferred to the terrorism court. She was tried by the same judge who sentenced the Al Jazeera guys. She and 230 other people who participated that day were given life sentences. She's 25 years old. So it's not really the same kind of tone in the film that we thought we were starting with, but so I'm going to show you two pieces that we did. One's on Yemen and one's the trailer.
I remember receiving, like everyone else, the Facebook invitation of going to Tahrir to protest against police brutality.
لو لسه عندنا قيامة ولسه عايزين نعيش كإنسان وكبني آدمين في البلد دي لازم ننزل يوم 25.
الثورة موحدانا كلنا يعني.
Basically, it was this utopia where everyone just looked so happy.
بقول زيهم ماسكين فيا زيهم، حسيت ان انا عندي قوه بطير زيهم. كان بالنسبه لي بقى تحول.
It was perfect. Whether under Mubarak, the Islamists, to the military-backed government, nothing has improved.
أصبحنا اليوم باسم حرية التعبير نستمع إلى خطاب يدعو إلى زواج القسري، لخطاب يدعو إلى تعدد الزوجات باسم الديمقراطية والحرية.
أهلي ما قالوا لي لا مش هتنزلي ومش هتروحي وحبسوني. إن أنا حاسين إن أنا جبت لهم العار يعني والفضيحة وكده.
وعلاش عملناها الثورة؟
As a woman, the demand for social equality is going to be very hard. They think that we're vulnerable enough that they can marginalize us from the political life and from the public sphere.
بيطلعوا كده عاملين زي الصراصير، كمية ملهاش حل، لابسة اسود.
النظام كان بيتعمد إن هو يكسر الشعب باللي بيعملوه في البنات في الأحداث دي تحديداً. أول حاجة عملوها طبعاً إن هم قلعوني الحجاب ورموه في الأرض، بس هم هدومي اللي فوق قطعوها. واللي كان بيضرب واللي كان بيتحرش. كان في ضابط حط رجله على وشي كده كان قبل ست البنات طبعا ما تتسحل بحوالي ساعة تقريبا.
A video uploaded yesterday on YouTube has circulated widely, provoked outrage at the extent of police brutality.
This woman, she represents Egypt. It's all of us. Men and women, but especially women.
كانت دائما في الأمام. هذه معركتنا.
إذا كان في شعب عربي يحتاج إلى الثورة فهو الشعب اليمني. إذا تحدثنا عن الفقر لا يوجد من هو أفقر. إذا تحدثنا عن الأمية لا يوجد من هو أكثر أمية. إذا تحدثنا عن الفساد لا يوجد حكم أكثر فسادا من الذي كان موجود في اليمن. أنا ولدت في 9/9/72. يعني عائلة بالنهاية عائلة فقيرة. أنا عندي 3 أخوات تزوجن زواج مبكر. واحدة فيهم تزوجت وهي ما تعرفش تنطق اسم زوجها صح. يوم عقدها وهم بيلحقوها في الشارع يدوروها ما لقيوهاش تلعب في الحارة. حملت مرتين وهي ما تعرفش إيش يعني حمل. توفيت وهي ما دخلتش 50. هذا المجتمع الملون اللي كان تقليدي لكن ملون. كان الإنسان مشاركات في كل شيء، من اللي في السوق، من الخبازات، من اللي بيبيعين، من اللي بيشتري، من نصل إلى منتصف الثمانينات، سنة 86 تحديداً. سنة 86 صارت صنعاء محملة بسلاح وقبائل. كل سنة بتمر كان المجتمع يندرج إلى التشدد. لوضع النساء كان مشكلة حديدية. أتذكر تماماً أيضاً وأنا تقريباً في 84 كان بدأ يظهر الجلباب الواسع الثقيل القماش اللي هو بيلبسنها فتيات معينات، ويلبسن لثام غير لثام اليمنيات. لثام ماهوش محدد لشكل الوجه وملتصق بالوجه، لثام واسع. الفيصل في المدرسة يجي في صف 5. حدث قرار يعتبر شرخ بالنسبة لي، قرار فصل التعليم، فصل البنات عن الأولاد. أنا طبعاً كنت أكره علي عبد الله صالح لأنه هو فرقني عن أصحابي. في هذه السنة بدأت مظاهر تكريس الحاكم. جت لنا باصات للمدرسة، باصات عسكر، وبالإجبار علينا كلنا أن احنا نخرج نستقبل الرئيس. لسبب أو لآخر لم يعجبني طريقة الحشد، ولم تعجبني عملية الإجبار. رفض. اعتصمنا في الفصل. كان هذا أول اعتصام أقوم به في حياتي، اعتصمنا في الفصل وضد علي عبد الله صالح. ساحة الحرية لم تبدأ من يوم، وكان المدنيين هم الجزء المخفي تماماً عن. للأمانة كان قائدتها منظمات المجتمع المدني وكان هذا الائتلاف ائتلاف مختلف. ائتلاف أثبت قوته رضي المتوكل، عبد الرشيد الفقيه، خالد الآنسي، حسم. متى سميت ساحة الحرية؟ كل ثلاثاء يحدث اعتصام وسميت ساحة الحرية. 24 يناير 2011 كنا نتابع ما يحدث في تونس. كان الحماس يأخذ منا كل ما أخذ. أن يسقط حاكم فاسد في بلد عربي بفعل شعبي، هذه تعتبر كانت بالنسبة لنا كأنها حلم مستحيل. شعرت أنه ربما أنه الثورة التونسية هي الإلهام الذي سيلهم الشارع اليمني. اتصلت بمجموعة من الأصدقاء إنه ما الذي بالإمكان أن نفعله من أجل أن نحتفي بهذه الثورة وندعو لثورة مشابهة. يومها صحت الصبح أكثر من العادة مبكرة، أكثر من العادة أشعر أن عندي مهمة كبيرة سأنجزها، كأننا في هذا اليوم ربما أننا خارج التحرير بلد أو شيء. وقفنا أمام السفارة التونسية، أخبرت مراسل الجزيرة أن لدي رسالة أريد أن أرسلها إلى علي عبد الله صالح. نسي وأتضامن مع أنفسنا وأتمنى أن تنتقل الحركة وأن ينتقل النظام، نظام علي عبد الله صالح الذي هددنا بالأفغنة والعرقنة والصوملة، أن نقول له نحن الآن من هذا الموقع وأمام السفارة التونسية نهدده بالتونسة. كنت أشعر وأنا أقول أن هذه الكلمة أنني أهز عرش الطغيان.
افسحوا الطريق لاخواتنا النساء حتى يتمكنن من دخول.
لما أتذكر الأيام الأولى في الثورة أشعر أنه الأيام بسيطة، استطعنا أن نخلق وطن في مساحة بسيطة جدا لا تتعدى ربما كيلومتر واحد، وخلقنا وطن وخلقنا مجتمع يمني متكاتف متآلف يحترم بعضها البعض. المرأة اليمنية كانت في مقدمة تلك الثورة، كان أغلب المسيرات تتقدمها نساء. كانت قضايا النساء حاضرة بقوة في 2011 في بدايته. كانت تحمل شعارات ولافتات تحكي عن موت الأمهات، تحكي عن زواج الصغيرات، عن وجود النساء كضحايا للأمية للفقر. بدأت تزاح النساء إلى بعيدا عن المنصة، إلى الخلف. وبعدها بأقل من شهر تم ضربهن في الميدان الذي قادينه لفترة ليست قصيرة. يوم إعلان الأسماء أجد اسمي من بين أسماء المشاركين في الحوار الوطني. قضايا المرأة المهمة التي أريد أن تطرح هي قضايا المرأة في مراكز صنع القرار، المرأة في الصحة، بما في ذلك زواج الصغيرات. كما أزيحت النساء من مشهد الثورة، تم أيضاً عملية كسر العظم بالنسبة للنساء في مؤتمر الحوار. استمرت النساء بشق الأنفس في ميدان الثورة. آخر شيء كان المشهد الذي تم في صنعاء، الثورة المسلحة التي تمت في صنعاء مؤخراً من نهاية شهر أغسطس إلى نهاية شهر سبتمبر وما زالت مستمرة. النساء داعيات للسلم، والمشهد مشهد حرب. واليمن دائماً في حرب، إذا كانت الحرب لا تسجل لكنها حرب موجودة. هناك حرب عن القاعدة، هناك حرب من القاعدة، هناك حرب بين الحوثيين والسلفيين، هناك حرب بين الحوثيين، هناك حروب متعددة. أعرف شخص في الدولة ويعتبر تقدمي جدا قال وبالفم المليان: الآن ليس وقت النساء، حريتهم مش وقته. الجميع يقول بما في ذلك نساء إن هذا ليس وقته، ولكن متى سيأتي وقته؟
I wanted to start by asking you if you could take us back to 2011, when you thought that this project was going to be an uplifting story, or a series of uplifting stories. What was the turning point where you noticed that things were going to go south for women?
Well, I mean, I think that two things. One is that one of the reasons we wanted to do the films in the first place, or the stories in the first place, is because we felt like all the reporting was either as women as victims, or like, oh my God, women are doing something, isn't that amazing? And so it kind of not really the experience that I knew that women had been through, because I knew that there was a long history of women being active and all the women that I met were quite inspiring. So that was that was definitely the inspiration. And for me, the turning point of, interestingly enough, the feeling that things were really going to go south was when, two things. One is International Women's Day on March 8th, 2011, which is right after Mubarak fell and that women were attacked in the square. And that to me seemed to be a very bad sign. And actually, Ronnie and I were just discussing, like, who was behind that attack. Was it the Islamists? Was it the thugs? Was it the police? Was it? And I've heard some women say, well, it was guys that they had been marching with. And it was not really clear who it was, but it was really clear that the issue of women's rights was not going to be on the table. And that to me was a bad sign. And then I have to say, though, when I felt like when Morsi was overthrown and the massacre happened, I felt that, wow, this is really not the film that we started out making. And that's actually when we really even changed tactics. But it became too dangerous to shoot in Libya. We were, and it became also the different countries that we had first thought of doing a film that tied the different countries together, but then what was happening was so different in each country, it became impossible to even think about doing that. And so we just started, in Egypt we realized that we were just going to start following somebody. So we had already identified a couple women and we were just started following their stories as they evolved.
What were the biggest challenges for you as you embarked on this project as a woman?
I think the biggest challenges for me were that I wasn't living there. I mean, more than anything, not just being a woman, but because since we had thought we were going to do a retrospective, but then we started doing something that was moving, just kind of covering what was happening, it was very difficult. And so we really began working with a lot of local people.
I'm also curious about, you touched on the media representations of women as either victims or oh my God, they're doing something. Tell us about what you're trying to do differently with the Trials of Spring.
I think that what we're trying to do is say that, like, why I'd like to see the media cover these stories more and more and more and more. Like, what's happening to, like, the women that we just saw in Yemen when the movement say, well, now is not the time for women. Why is that not a front page story of what's happening with women? Why is the fact that even what happened on International Women's Day was not that big of a story? Why is it the fact that, like, I think that women, in fact, are in leadership positions in a lot of the human rights organizations that are working still consistently on the ground. I don't feel that their stories are covered. I feel the same thing as the ambassador said in the beginning, that what the extremists on both sides hold is kind of a disregard for women, and I think that story should be covered more, not as women as victims, but women as agents and active. And I'd like to see that more, and keep pressing for that in everything we do.
I'd like to invite Rana to speak to us a little bit, who arrived from Egypt just yesterday. And before this panel started, she told me about what she was able to do this morning, and I wondered if she could share that with us, because it's quite radical.
I just walked. I walked on the street for a couple of hours, and then I went to Central Park, and I sat on the bench for like another hour. And that's really something that you don't get to do in Cairo. It's not easy. It's not easy to do that. You need to be very defensive and very aggressive and willing to take a lot of harassment and eyes staring at you all the time. So you just don't walk. You get in your car, you hide behind black tinted glass windows. So yeah.
That's very sad. You ran a newsroom that at one point had 80% women, both in management and in the newsroom. I don't think I've been a journalist all of my adult life. I don't think I've ever been in a newsroom that had even 50% women in leadership positions. First, I'm curious about how you were able to pull this off, and how has this changed in these last few very sad years?
right after the revolution, I became the editor of the paper, and we wanted to increase the staff. And all I did was get women to start reporting, and we really do a good job at that. I didn't, intentionally make it an 80%. It wasn't really intentional. I wasn't discriminating against men or anything. I just, I found very good CVs out there, and they weren't getting chances elsewhere. And so I ended up having 80% of my staff women, and all the management, actually 100% of the management were women. But then they went to cover protests in Tahrir, and at the beginning, we started having the harassment and the assault and the rape and all that. And the girls would tell me, no, we will still go, we have to go, and being a feminist and all, I couldn't just say, no, you're not going to go. So, but then one of these days, one of the ladies went to cover a protest in Tahrir, and she got assaulted, and they ripped off her clothes, and it was really bad. So on that day, we decided that, I really can't put them in danger anymore. I couldn't send out female reporters anymore on the streets, and it became increasingly difficult to send them not only on protests, just to cover anything, just to report on anything. Reporters in general, male and female, are having problems reporting from Egypt. So it's even much worse for female reporters. And now the staff is 50-50.
What would you call what's going on in your home country now? Is it extremism or is it militarism?
Extreme militarism. Exactly. It's extremism on all sides. It's radical Islamists are rising somewhere, and then you have the nationalistic, in a very negative sense of it, coming from the military side, and they're both fighting each other and feeding on each other's violence. One of them starts to kill, the other starts to kill even worse, and retaliation and revenge from both sides, and it only gets worse.
Right. We see in Ginny's film that women in Egypt felt deceived by the revolution. We see them talking about how under the guise of freedom and under the guise of democracy, all sorts of draconian measures are being discussed, including the marriage of children and polygamy. The backdrop, of course, is the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood as the elected government of the country, and a move towards the implementation of Sharia law. Is a conservative interpretation of Islam compatible with human rights for women?
Not really. Not really. I mean, it wouldn't be equal. If you think of it, I'm just talking to you ladies about a piece I wrote for IPS News, and it's about the basic laws in Islam. If we're going to talk about at least the personal status laws, a woman does not inherit. A man inherits double what a woman inherits. That's basically discrimination. There's nothing here that that can be even remotely close to women's rights. A man can marry for women, and a woman cannot marry for men. This is discrimination. A man can divorce his wife. A woman cannot divorce her husband except by a court order, a case, a lawsuit. So it's basically it's basically discrimination. Within a certain type of society, within a certain type of rules and laws, other ones complementing this, yes, it would be discrimination. If you have the full cycle of Islamic laws, moderate Islamic laws, yes, that could work, because if a man inherits double what his wife inherited, he's supposed to, pay for everything in their life. So. But with the big scale, no.
Can you talk about the law for adultery that you were discussing with me before we started this panel?
Okay, this is one of the laws that is not Islamic and does not come from the Islam doctrine. It actually came from the French penal code, which we adopted somewhere very, very early on. And it seems that, you know, our lawmakers just made a point of getting each and every law that is against women to just put it in our system. So they picked out the worst law ever. It's the adultery law. It's the crime, committing the crime of adultery. So what happens is that if a man catches his wife red-handed while committing the crime of adultery, he can kill her and he would get 24 hours sentence. He is not charged for murder. It is not murder, it's honor killing. He got so agitated, so he killed them both. But of course, if a woman catches her husband in the act and she kills them, she gets charged for murder, of course. So that's one thing. The second thing is that, okay, a man would not be considered an adulterer, someone who, you know, a criminal, if he does that outside of the marital home and with a non-married woman. It wouldn't be a crime. She would be taken for prostitution, though. If a woman is in the same situation, she is charged with adultery. It's completely crazy, seriously. The only way a man would be charged with adultery in my country is if he is caught inside his marital home, caught red-handed, with, I don't know, 3 or 4 witnesses seeing them, in the act, excuse me, seriously, in the act. And then maybe, you know, he can be, and then he would take 6 months in prison, by the way. That would be his sentence. A woman would get 2 years. So, yeah, and this one we got from the French.
These laws are so galling and so,
Yes.
so terribly unfair, they're almost funny, but I'm sure they're not very funny in your country. What is the status of the women's movement and of resistance to this kind of injustice?
Given the fact that we don't have any civil society organizations being able to work in my country anymore, we have a horrifying NGO law that was passed recently that stopped any funds, any organization, any women's rights movement from being able to work. We really don't have civil society working for women anymore. We have very few of them who are doing perfect research and they're doing a great job. But we cannot say that it is wide scale. They can't move around properly. They're not getting enough support. They're not getting funds. But the police can raid the offices at any point in time and arrest them all and put them behind bars. So it's very limited now.
As an editor and a journalist, I'm curious to know how limited you are. Are you able to write what you would like to write? Are you able to report as you would like to report?
We walk the thin line. We walk the thin line. But yes, we are able to report, and I'm able to write only because our paper is in English. So for them, it doesn't talk to the masses, it doesn't talk to the public, so we're left a little bit of margin of freedom to be able to write and speak. They don't think we're important, and we're women, you know, so we're not important.
I think I know the answer to this question, but do you feel that the media is covering the challenges of women in Egypt properly?
Absolutely not.
Right. And how? What are the specific gaps that need to be filled, especially in the international media like the New York Times?
Okay. When international media covers women's issues in Egypt, they cover them from the perspective of the American people, the American women or the European women. You didn't know, for example, about our laws. The first thing that would come to your mind, which is actually the first thing you asked me right now when I sat, is the harassment on the street. You know what? This is a problem, but it is the least of our problems. Our problems are much bigger. Our problems are violence at home. This is a problem. You're concerned with what we can wear, or you know, whether we're being harassed or not. Our problems are much bigger. And it's difficult for you to see, just as Ginny was saying just a few minutes ago, being an outsider. You don't know the suffering that we have. Almost every woman I know was beaten at some point by her husband. Actually, I don't know any woman Egyptian woman who wasn't at some point beaten by her husband. That's normal. That's okay. I'm not talking beaten, bruised and broken. But yeah, slapped on the face at some point. That's normal. You need to start from here. Not from whether I can walk on the street or not. Am I safe at home? That's the problem. I'm not safe at home. I'm never going to be safe on the street.
Right. Sanam, you're an activist and you have inspired many activists. Your Twitter handle is @WhatTheWomenSay. Can you tell me about this and about your particular fight?
Thank you. I've lost my voice, but I still speak. So if people who know me, my voice is usually less deep than this. Why is it called What the Women Say? Because what we find, and I've been, it's been 20 years, but ICAN has been around only since 2006, is that, ask the women about what's going on in their countries. They will give you a perspective which is both deep in terms of the social context, but directly links it to the political, to the economic, gives you an understanding that you will not get from just the political male elite or many of the analysts that are the normal kind of sources. And so they have a lot to say, and they're often the first ones to warn us about things, but because they're the first ones to feel it and see it. We produce reports called What the Women Say. They're gendered, political, and security country briefs, analyses. And our Egypt one and it was done by women, gives you a perfect analysis of actually what happened in the elections and the fact that Morsi did not win the majority of the votes. In fact, we do a breakdown of our Iraq one. We produced it in January of 2013. The women were warning about the rise of the extremists. It's on the front page. It's all. So we listen to what the women say. They have they can identify the problems. They identify the trends, but they also, the people that we work with are at the front lines of the solutions as well, and that's why we call it What the Women Say.
When I was working in West Africa, I would often find myself, I'm a feminist since birth, I think, and I was astounded at the fact that I would often not quote women in my own stories because it was so hard to find literate women. And when a source is not literate, they're not able to express themselves often as well as somebody who is. What advice do you have for journalists in the field dealing with that particular discrepancy in light of the fact that in so many of these countries, female literacy is always lagging?
So I think it's two things. I think one is come to us. We will find it. Come to the CSW. Look at the room. It's full of people who are activists from across the world. 8,500 organizations from around the world are registered. They come to New York every year. And I don't think the New York media picks up the fact that the world is here. Literally, it's ridiculous. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just because somebody isn't literate doesn't mean that they don't know and that they're not smart. So to me, and in our work, we have the same thing, that you are working with people that maybe speak different languages and so forth. But if I go in and I say, we're here to talk to you about SSR, and SSR is security sector reform, of course it's going to put off a lot of people. It's going to put off half the room, frankly. It's going to put off, lots of. But if you go in and say, okay, tell me about how your army has been engaging in the community. Is your police providing security? Is your police an oppressive force? What's going on? It doesn't matter how literate or illiterate they are. They can tell you because they're experiencing it. So it's our job to not to be simplistic, but to make sure that we are talking the language. We are in their shoes. They are living with this reality. So we have to go back into their shoes and talk to them from the standpoint that they're in. And it's remarkable how much they know and how much they can tell you. And yeah, it's you just have to take the extra step to engage in that way.
Can you talk to us about how the extreme interpretation of Islam has become a justification for violence against women?
So, we have this conversation amongst our network all the time, and I think the most significant fact that everybody comes out with is this is not Islam. It's not an interpretation. It's some, bunch of people somewhere decided that they wanted to have their version of Islam. And they have managed to spread it because they've had money and they've filled vacuums of absence of education and so. So so the idea that this has anything to do with religion, I think, has to be questioned in the first place. But how has it spread? It's spread because certain states in the Middle East, places like Saudi Arabia, have been for the last 30 years systematically spreading a version of Wahhabism and Salafism through mosques, through madrasas, through supporting, university students and so forth. And part of the reason why they're able to do that is because also for the last 30 years, we've had economic policies from international institutions that have really created a void and a vacuum in terms of education, healthcare, and basic social safety nets. And religious institutions go and provide that. So whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah, whether it's the Catholic Church in Latin America, they provide certain services, and actually we cede human rights to them because they are providing basic services in a lot of these places. But they're also then spreading their version of what they want the society to be supporting. So if you look at Latin America, we see it around reproductive rights of women. If you look at the Middle East, we see it around the kinds of issues that we're looking at. And actually, wherever religion is used by groups, it's all about power, but wherever religion is then kind of used as a layering of that search for power, there is always the repression of women. It doesn't matter whether it's extreme Buddhist, extreme, or Jewish Orthodoxy, Christianity, Islam, you name it, they always target women, and it's part and parcel of that, essential to the ideology of these groups, absolutely central to it. It's not about ethnicity, it's about the fact that they don't want us speaking out and being in public.
Mossarat, you have found an ingenious way to combat extremism by talking to mothers in Pakistan. Can you talk to us about your work and how has this approach worked?
Okay, I'll just give you a very small story. I was just walking through one of the conflict-prone and affected area of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, an area which borders Afghanistan. It's called Swat. And I was talking to the mothers, and one of them, she said, my son has escaped, he has run away because of the fear of the agencies, the security forces, but he's innocent. And then I went to one of the brigadier commander there, and I said, see, this woman is being chased after, everybody is like, trying to, she's so helpless, but her son is innocent. And he said, are you talking about Osama? I said, yes. He was 17 years old at that time. He said he's the most wanted, youngest boy in the area because from his remote control, while standing at the roof of his house, he actually killed 7 military personnel in a jeep. So if a mother sitting in her own house doesn't know what her son is doing at the roof of the house, that was the time that I realized this is the mother with whom we need to work. We need to make her understand. We need to make her realize and recognize if her son goes the wrong way. And that was the moment that we started working with the same mother. So how we work with the mothers? Because I would just say they feel that every mother, I think, in the world feels the same way, because I'm not a mother, so I don't know, that the child is innocent. He or she can't commit anything wrong. So what we did with the mothers, we started working with her on thinking otherwise. We build her critical thinking first. We build her ability and capacity to start questioning. Because in my view, it's the mother who is the first one to recognize and realize the first sign of anger, resentment, or behavioral change in her child. And when when these boys, they join the other group, that behavioral change is always there. It takes place. And if she knows, she starts recognizing from the very first instance that the son is going the wrong way, she definitely can handle the situation. So it's all about prevention, preventing them from becoming radicalized and extremist, because prevention is always better than cure.
Sanam, you had a thought that you wanted to add? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Can you give us some examples of successes you've had with mothers that you've worked with, where they were able to identify the radicalization and do something about it?
Yes, because when we work with the mothers and with a selected group of mothers in the beginning, so when they would not come to us like that, we had to approach them through different means. And one of the way, like, because the area we are working in is very, very conservative, it's the women's mobility is very restricted, and majority of them are illiterate. So we just try to help them in like giving them some livelihood skills, so they would come to us. And while giving them the livelihood skills, we actually start building their critical thinking also. And this was the way when we started talking to them about the early signs, like, sort of indicators. When this happens, it means your son is going the wrong way. And they started learning about it. Oh yes, my son comes at 12 o'clock at night. I never asked him. My son actually comes up with a mobile, which is like, worth 7,000, 6,000 rupees, which is like, I can't even imagine of 6,000 rupees, because we don't have that much, like, the income. So these were the things when they started talking to each other. And they realized that many of them, like, are facing the same situation. And during that process, they started talking to their sons. And they went to an extent that they started chasing their sons, because we told them that if they come late, you have to ask them. And they would come, every day they would come in with a new story, that now, yes, we can see that they have got new friends. These were some of the indicators. Yes, they come up with a new literature. We have never seen these things in their hands before. They all the time, like, they said, you stop watching televisions, but they themselves would sit in front of the television and then would actually go to the video shops, because in the video shops there were these, like, CDs and videos which were developed by the other group, by the extremist group. So this was the type of, like, knowledge and skills these women gained through the training that we imparted. And they started questioning their sons. But then one thing I must put it here, that unless and until a woman is economically not empowered, she can't question. So when she started earning, when she actually took some sort of money back home, she was in a position to, like, ask questions from her son. And that helped us, because we now have a group of women who not only can think critically, but can ask questions. And this group of women is multiplying every day, because the other women, when they saw that their son has got, they're being transformed, they're being de-radicalized, and they are now being reintegrated and rehabilitated, and now they've got that respect and recognition in the community. So it's like, it's epidemic, it's spreading.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that the international community could do to help you in Pakistan in this venture?
We started with one boy in 2007 whom we de-radicalized and rehabilitated because of working with the mother. Today, we have transformed 900 plus radicalized extremist boys. They have been rehabilitated and reintegrated in the society. That's one thing. But the question is very, very difficult to answer. And this has been asked from me, I think, many times. My answer is that I want the international community to recognize and respect the role that women are playing and can play in countering violent extremism. Secondly, when they are talking, like, in the bilateral context to the government of Pakistan, they should include on all these processes the women as well. Women has always been ignored. She is never there on the table. So that's another thing I would really love the international community to start pushing for women inclusion, and not only in the planning and policies, but of course in all these bilateral and multilateral dialogues as well.
Mossarat, we saw that Malala was shot in this brutal and terrible way, not far from the region where you work. I'm curious about your personal story. Do you face risk yourself when you go to these areas, and could you tell us about that?
Of course, the type of work that I'm doing is very, very challenging, and it is very, very difficult. But I have a maxim, it's my personal one, and it is that a peace builder, if it dies or is being shot in the middle of her, of course, like doing her work, she's not a peace builder. A peace builder is the one who actually achieve the goal that she's working for. The movement that we have started, I think if I die in the middle, I will not call myself a peacemaker or a peace builder. So we are facing a lot of threats. We are, of course, every day there is a new challenge, there is a new threat coming in towards us. But we have tried to overcome those challenges and threats. And here I would love to actually share one of the stories, which is Sanam's favorite. And we are working in one of the most volatile regions of the world. I hate to call it volatile because it used to be very, very peaceful. But thanks to all those who made it volatile today for us. This is an area called Khyber Agency. Another area which of course borders Afghanistan. And my mobilizers who were working over there on a very different issue, that was health and women issues, they were abducted by one of the extremist group over there. It is called the Mangal Baghs group. And when I learned about it, I was in Peshawar. I said I have to go and rescue and release these boys. So my whole staff, they said, oh no, you don't have to go, madam. It's like, it's very dangerous. So anyway, I went there. And it's around 1 hour, and a half hour drive from Peshawar. So I went to the male quarters, that is his area where he was living. And before entering, there is this huge big, the gates. The gates were there. The man was standing at the gate with the Kalashnikov. And he told my colleague, the male colleague, tell her not to get down. And my male colleague literally, he said, madam, I was trembling when you were getting down. So I got down. I just said, open the gate. Because in this big gate, there is a small door that they usually use. So he opened the door. I went inside. There was this 40, 50 men sitting in that area. When they saw me, one of the men, he had, we have these shawls around us, these Pathan men usually do it. So he just covered his face like this when he saw me. A woman in the middle of the men's quarter. 40, 50 bearded men sitting in that area. And I just said, I would like to know, I just thought that this is Mangal Bagh. I said I would like to talk to my brother Mangal Bagh. And they just pointed towards him, he's the one. And they said, why have you abducted my two mobilizers? And they gave me a lot of reasons. This is the Western idea that you're working for these Western people, the US particularly, and this, I said, whoever is giving me the money is for the health of your sister, your daughter, your mother. So how can you actually deny these facilities to, if you can, don't you, when you get ill, don't you take medicine and anyway, stuff like that, it went on. I had a dialogue with him for 40 minutes and finally I convinced him and he agreed. He did not agree, he just said, my sister, from now onwards, we will not only help you in like working for our mothers and for our sisters and daughters. Look at the relationship, because I didn't say the women, I said your mother, your sister, and your daughter. And then, till today, thanks God, he not only released those two, but till today we are working in that area, and very peacefully and very efficiently and effectively we are carrying out our work under the garb of some initiative or the other, but basically we are de-radicalizing and reforming and engaging very, very extremist and radicalized youth in that area.
Thank you. Sanam, could you introduce the film that we're going to see now, which will touch on Mossarat's life as well?
So one of the things that we do at ICAN is we have an annual forum in, we do it in Turkey because it's the easiest place for visas, to be honest with you, but it's for all our partners from the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia, and now we're extending to the Caucasus and other places, basically Muslim majority contexts. And it's really a space where activists, journalists, and others come together to share their experiences, to learn from each other, to get solidarity, to get some space just to reflect and so forth. And last year in 2014, in November, we were in Turkey together, and we had a filmmaker come, and Jamie came from Peace Is Loud, and they interviewed 22 of the women who were there. And we decided that they're fabulous interviews, but we decided to make short films. And this particular film that you're going to see is really some of the women who spoke, and it's talking about their experiences of extremism, how they understand it, what they're doing. And we wanted to show you the diversity of countries and voices, because this is not just a Middle East problem right now. This is Middle East, North Africa, East Africa, West Africa, the Caucasus. You know, it is spreading. I was in Sri Lanka last summer, and we were seeing signs of it. So this problem is spreading everywhere, including, of course, Europe. And we need to, everywhere we talk with women, they are at the front lines of fighting this and seeing it. So we really want their voices, as Mossarat said, to be at the table where the decisions are being made, not in separate forums where we have majority women and then majority men, as you well know. So I hope that this gives you some indication. Thank you.
I think it's a very high time to tackle this issue. It's better to prevent this problem at the beginning than struggling, fighting against this problem.
Extremism is rapidly growing, and it's coming faster than us.
The ISIS have hijacked our beautiful religion, you know, and they have misinterpreted it, and there have been, you know, no religion on the face of the earth calls for selling women or beheading heads or doing what's going on.
We're not living our religion, we're just fighting for it.
Since the Iran and Iraq war, I was 10 years old when it happened. We have seen the blood, we have seen the bombing, and this has become a part of our lives. The youth of Libya are two groups, either killers or being killed. They're targeting the youth and they brainwash them.
We need to get out of the loop of military and Islamists. We've been on and on in the same kind of fascist regimes, and once we get out of that loop, things will start to be good.
The one part that extremism has is terror. It's the power of putting fear. It's actually just power.
They come up with a lot of attractive packages. The package is, of course, they hand over to a young 14, 15, 16 years old boy 20,000, 15,000 rupees per month, which they had never thought of, and then a mobile and sometimes a gun also. So this power of the gun and money itself, I think, is very attractive for the young minds.
We have extremists offering them money, offering them an alternative, and even giving them another model, role model. You are a fighter, you are a man, you are powerful, you are strong. That's why I'm talking from crisis of masculinity. So you lose many adventures if you are with progressives, etc. On the other side, you have the paradise, you have this position of martyr, and you are glorified. And you have money for your family. You can send them money while you are in Syria, etc. And you are finally a man, the powerful man.
The Islamists made a big mistake. When they arrived, they used force. They used terror to make people join their ranks.
I think you need to hit rock bottom to actually push and push and push for change that is sustainable, that is grassroots based, as opposed to let us as countries and let us as governments think about what the solutions could be. These are real people, real experiences, and thinking about what could make a difference for them.
Currently, there are several solutions. Now, there's a very serious initiative that is seeking to unite all the democratic and national forces and builds a partnership among all of them. And secondly, is the empowerment of civil society organizations.
Once we get these boys in PAMAN, Center for Conflict Transformation and Peace Building in Islamabad, it's a phased-wise training that we conduct with these boys. We help them in understanding their own self, they being not only the Muslims and Pashtuns, but also human beings, and how they can actually contribute positively to the progress and development of their own culture, their own religion, their own community, and finally to their own society and country.
The project that I'm working on, which is with Syrian refugees, it's called the Youth-Led Approach to Peaceful Coexistence between Syrian and Lebanese Youth. And what we work on is how to have social cohesion between those two communities, and especially youth, through arts and through different art workshops, which are video, music, drawing, visuals, and theater.
We need to educate the youth since, from the very beginning, from the primary education, they need to be educated about the law, about the rights, about human rights, about what does it mean to be a civilian, what are your civic duties and your responsibilities and your rights to begin with. And the police force, the Interior Ministry should have a curriculum about women's rights, about human rights, and there should be oversight on these police stations and over the police officers, so that they abide by the law. You need to have a human rights person, a human rights lawyer in each and every police station, at least to begin with, in the initiation phase of such a reform. Educate them, monitor them, audit over them, and then move forward.
I work to empower women refugees in Kilis. There's a big number of refugees currently living there.
We're done with the question. The healing must begin.
Women are coming here with the plural I, with the multiple identities and how they are struggling with the multiple identities and the multiple roles that they have in their own homes, in their own communities, and also struggling with peace, also struggling for rights, and also trying to tell the world we have solutions, because their solutions are working and they are able to resist. And it's a wonderful platform to have a collective voice of all these plural identities, of this one woman who says I can and multiple women say I can.
At the end of the day, regardless of what religion or country we come from, we are all humans. We all believe in human values. I'm proud to be a woman, for sure. I'm lucky to be a woman. I'm proud also to be a Muslim and a Libyan and a humanist.
I grew up having good opportunities of education, good opportunities of having a supportive family, good opportunities of having to live in an open-minded society. And the experiences I got in the field of civil work and seeing all this social injustice that's happening, it got me thinking that I can never be on the bench and not do something about it, and that's what keeps me going.
بيتي بسوريا أنا بنيته بصعوبة شديدة.
I feel bad when I see my house now demolished, especially because I built it in great difficulty. And I see pictures of the house of my childhood that was owned by my family and houses of my other relatives. Of course I feel bad, but my kids are okay. When I see cases of other women who have sons who are badly injured, who have lost a limb or an eye, I feel like I'm not the one who is worst off.
Allah helps those who really want to help themselves, and somebody from that society, from that community, has to stand up to this challenge, and that's my power.
Despite all this, they will not be able to divide us. I will still hold my hand out in peace and in cooperation to my neighbor who is Sunni, who is Christian, who is Baha'i, all the minorities in Iraq, in order for us to live in harmony and peace.
I'd like to open the floor up for questions, if anybody might have some. Do we have microphones for the audience?
This is wonderful. I have a question. Why, just looking at the room, why do you think these women's stories would be of interest only to women? How come there is no man panelist among yourselves?
I would say that I don't think that these stories are only interesting to women. Actually, I think that women don't often enough get a chance to speak ourselves, and so that's why I'm very happy that we get a chance to speak.
I just want to add, the reason why we made the film is precisely to be able to get it out to a much broader audience, because the space that we provide for these women, we're opening it up and we're inviting more people at various, but they need that safety and that security to be just amongst themselves. They never get that across the region, and we've seen how important it is for their own solidarity. So, but we have opened it up, and you especially are always invited to those.
Yeah, can I just add that I've been on so many nearly all-male panels, I can't even count them, and when we have an all-male panel, I think the impression is that it's for a general audience. When it's an all-female panel, the impression is that it's women's only. And I think that's a problem that we need to address in our own thinking.
Hi, my name is Hajar Naidi. I'm a reporter for Women's News. I want to follow up with what you said, Rana, that I agree we have to get out of the loop of extremism and militarism. Now we have a lot of women, especially from Europe, that have left and joined the ranks of ISIS. A lot of them are underage. They want to return home. They've been brainwashed, obviously. Now they just see the reality on the field, on the ground. They want to return home. What is the solution? What would you suggest then to government, NGOs, groups to try to bring them back home?
Again, it's education to begin with. It will always be education. They need to know more about what they're getting themselves into. They need to know more about what lies ahead for them. And they need to be rehabilitated. I think Sanam would answer much better than I am in this one.
I just, one of the things is that, so these girls are being recruited online and Twitter and so forth in various ways, right? But one of the issues is the story of Syria and all the awful things that are going on in Syria. That's what's driving a lot of this. Now, part of the problem comes back to the media, because the media does not hear the voices, does not interview the kind of women that we're working with, who have systematically, from 3 years ago, were saying, you are all helping us kill each other, you are not helping us talk to each other, we need a political solution which is inclusive. They're saying, we don't want the bombs, we don't want the weapons, we want other forms of assistance, right? So for us, the importance of the media becomes really critical, because we need those voices in the media, so that if you're a young 15-year-old girl sitting in Birmingham and you're being recruited, at least you're hearing another voice, and it's the voice of a woman. But it's this catch-22, that if they're not in the media, then how do these girls ever know that there's something else? And so the onus is on organizations like ours, and we're tiny, to try and break that media barrier and have these voices heard. But we will do what we can, but we really need the help of mainstream media to interview these kinds of women, all the women that we work with, so that the girls actually, and the boys, hear an alternative version and vision of what is possible.
Thank you. My name is Tanya, and I'm a millennial, and we were just at the Youth Assembly last month. And at the Youth Assembly, I was surrounded by my peers from all around the world. And at one point, we all sort of talked about how none of us could ever remember a time when the world wasn't at war. And then we started to count, and there are over 65 countries right now that are either at war with each other or facing over 600 militant and extremist groups around the world. And I am so grateful for 1325 and Ambassador Chaudhry for leading this, but we only have 9% women that are peace negotiators. So to quote Lema Bowie, I am really tired of being politely angry, and we are very tired of being told that we are too young to make a difference. So my question is, as the generation and the 1 billion people that will inherit this world, how do we get young women and young girls to seriously think about careers in peacemaking, in diplomacy, in peace building? Because the images that we saw may not have existed if we were more of a 50-50 kind of a world. And also I think it's so important to be able to listen to the voices that will inherit the future, because youth are not always represented, even more than women, I think, at these platforms.
Well, there isn't really much of a question.
How do we do it? How do we get girls to
You need to talk, you need to raise awareness inside your school, inside your university. Make panels, make discussions, have a room and invite everyone. Somebody should tell somebody, should tell somebody. It always works like that. And of course, the media, please, the media. Guys, here are the people.
I'll give you two thoughts. I was in my late 20s when I was involved in getting 1325. And I did it because I believed, because I worked with a lady who's sitting here, who's called Ndeye Sow, who was actually one of the pioneers of working with women on the ground on conflict resolution. And because I did a lot of homework. I had to know the history of diplomacy, I had to know the understanding of international law, I had to know what women were doing on the ground, and come with the knowledge and all the consultations we did on the ground, and come forward with that knowledge and that conviction to do the advocacy. We are still fighting that battle of trying to get voices for women, and I'm involved, we're developing a better peace tool and standards and all those kinds of things. What I want younger people to do is, you need to know the history of what's been done so far, because otherwise you start now and we're going back 15 years, we're going back 20 years. You need to read and know exactly what's been done, who's been at the forefront of this, what the strategies have been, and literally many of the people in this room have been pioneers. And then take it from there. But your voice, you need to be active. It's tough. We're breaking the barriers that a generation before us, wasn't able to do, but we're standing on their shoulders as well. So that respect for what's been done before is critical, but at the same time, we're also opening doors for you. And believe me, we want you in, because I want to go and plant some pomegranate trees. I'm getting tired.
My name is Alice Were. I'm from Kenya. My question is really to do with the bride, the child bride that I've brought to the diaspora. It has been a problem for the girls who are in love with people who come and see them who are strangers. But once they go to a different country, they're made to be subjects of some sort. And it's a voice, it's a minority voice that we have this association whereby they have been brought to a country which it's not really they're favorable, but because they are in love with whoever who has brought them, they are not able to travel back to their homes after they find out that these things that they were promised in this different country does not really happen. So for a minority voice, I was just wondering whether one sends in the sentiment of these particular voices, or how does a minority group approach the media in your situation? For example, if I had a case that I wanted to highlight, or a group that I wanted to highlight, do I send it directly to your organization, or do I get someone who would come and interview my organization? I was just wondering.
You need to find a journalist who would be interested in the story. If you find just one journalist interested in the story, you'd get it out. Once it's out, it's out. If also you have access to some of the rights groups, the civil society groups, of course, but then the most important thing is to find a journalist who would be interested. Find a name, try to contact, you know. Excuse me?
I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. I mean, it's overwhelming for all of us, this question. But as I said, we're spreading. We started with Middle East and, Pakistan and Afghanistan, and now we're talking to women in all these other places. So I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Nyara Zai. I'm the General Secretary of the World Young Women's Christian Association and the AU Ambassador for Campaign to End Child Marriage. First is to say just congratulations and keep on the fight. We know it's not easy. We know it's not easy to stand up there, to put your face out, to really put yourself at risk. This is what it means to fight for peace and for justice and for human rights in our time. I was in Beijing, and so to see this conversation happening again 20 years down the line, I'm like, there's something missing. Something is not happening. We cannot continue to have this conversation 20 years down the line. 3 points. There is an amazing young champion who spoke from here. I just want to share a quick example that it's doable, and I want to do a shout out to the Norwegians on our work in South Sudan. Really, it's doable. We need an intentionality to have young women, young people in our delegations. And to be able to do that, and to ask the diplomats, the governments, the facilitators, because the moment peace arrives, these are the young people who are requested to be voters. So the politicians would come for the vote bank, but these guys are not in the peace table. So it's a collective responsibility. They are leaders today, they are not leaders tomorrow. So they are leaders today and leaders tomorrow. Secondly, I would like to hear, Sanam, we've been in this conversation for a while. What is not happening around the peace agreements? The issue of impunity, the issue of accountability. Because when I look at our work in the Middle East, I can just follow, I can count on my fingers the peace agreements on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the agreements on Egypt, the peace talks which are at times dying or not happening around Syria. Where is the relationship in your analysis between extremism, militarism, and the failure of implementation of existing agreements? Just to be able to connect with the actual results of the peace talks and in relation to what we are seeing. The last comment that I have is on child marriage. which I don't call marriage because it's sexual abuse. We have to find an appropriate word for it. I hear this very unacceptable justification that our girls have to be married in order to be protected. So you're taking girls from one form of sexual violence and abuse into another form of sanctioning sexual violence and abuse. How do we address this as part of the conversation of abuse of girls and refusing the non-justification of the language of protection for perpetuation of abuse of girls? Thank you.
Sanam, do you want to do that?
I think I'll just try to respond to the first part of your question. I think in any negotiations, whether it's peace negotiations or otherwise, you need political will. I think the political will globally is missing, and that's why these negotiations failed. Secondly, I think one more thing, look at the political dynamics of the region where these talks always fail. Secondly, look at the global interest. Whose interest is there that the talk should fail and it should never materialize? So I think we need to look at it in the in the larger context. It's not only limited to those particular areas, because it is serving the interest of, I think, major stakeholders globally, and that's why the talks fail.
I see this a little bit up close and personal when we're especially in the realm of the UN, and part of it is conceptual. As you know, people on the ground, when you say peace talks are happening or we want peace negotiations, their notion of what should be happening there is really about transformation of their society. It's really about a blueprint for the future. I think the international community is still stuck at, let's get a quick power sharing deal, let's get it signed, and let's just get out of there. And what I saw and I was appalled by was that even our terminology, when we say power sharing, it's for that person, right? So we've identified a transition government in country X. We don't know who these guys really are, and they're predominantly guys. And then we give them, and it's power sharing. We don't say it's responsibility sharing. We don't say, you're now Minister of Finance, and you have to make sure that the money gets to the community and the people. So our own language should change, number one. Number two, the problem has become more complicated. We have non-state actors, there's a proliferation of violence, and all these, but the solution has stayed the same. We're still looking for the men, for the male leaders. Shimon Peres apparently had said that sex and peace happen in the dark. With all due respect, the sex part we can agree or disagree on, but the peace part we definitely disagree on. Because look what they've done, right? It's the same old guys, literally the same old guys. And they're not getting us anywhere. So, and if you, yesterday in the Telegraph in London, they talked about Tony Blair, how completely defunct he has become in the Middle East. People have died. And it's appalling. It's really, really appalling that there hasn't been this shift. It's inertia. It's a lack of a willingness of major institutions and major governments to actually demand the changes. The change is hard. We're working on it in terms of, okay, which civil society and what are the models? But we have many, many examples of how you can be more inclusive and make sure that the parties that are at the table, which are the guys with the guns, basically are being accountable to their own communities. That really has to be the priority for anybody who gets involved in peace negotiations. Governments, multilaterals. And until we have that, that's why we fight what we fight. But it's ridiculous that 20 years on, after all these changes, there's still this mentality that, oh, civil society, oh, women, God forbid, who are you? Who are you to come here? How dare you think that you should, you become track 3, you go off and do your community. We're talking about peace and we're talking about sustainable peace, and the research shows that inclusive processes work better. So it's really time for these institutions to be responsive.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time now, and we have a reception outside until 8:45, and I'm told that after 8:45 we need to leave the UN using the exit on 42nd Street. Thank you to our distinguished all-female panel.